Hi, welcome to another devlog for AAA Simulator. Since my last video, I've been getting my game to minimum viable artwork. To explain what that means, I need to start by talking about the strategy of making a game. There's something I've noticed about my fellow game developers, either here on YouTube or out in the world. Most game devs concentrate only on making a game, not on the business that surrounds it. Don't get me wrong, this can be a good thing. I actually think it's what most of us prefer. Just leave us alone so we can make our art, right? Well, I don't have that luxury. I need to think about making a game as an overarching strategy of cultivating systems. In simple terms, that means that as a solo developer, I need to think of the best way to develop AAA Simulator and get it out in the world as quickly and efficiently as possible. Spending too long on development is costly, but rushing isn't feasible either. I'm only one person. The solution is to think in systems, which is something a game designer should be good at anyway. Specifically, the system I'm talking about now is marketing. Here's my timeline. I want to have AAA Simulator ready for 4 to 5 screenshots by next week. Then I have to take 3 weeks off to go celebrate Diwali, which, sorry to say, means it might be a while before my next video. But after that, I want to have a gameplay trailer ready by mid-December. These screenshots and trailer will be for the initial launch of the Steam page, so that people can get an idea what the game's about and maybe wishlist it. Hint, hint. There's a Steam Next Fest in February, so I want to have a demo ready to playtest by the end of January so I can debut it at that Next Fest. Then in March, we release. This means either an early access release if there's enough interest in the game, or a full release if there isn't, so that I can move on to the next project. So minimum viable artwork means enough artwork to make those early screenshots, which means a slice of the game that looks complete even though it really isn't. You might be asking how this is different from a normal game. Well, a normal studio would be leaving the prototyping stage and going into production right now, and I am too, but I've kind of front-loaded the art production. I'm officially in the production stage now, but it doesn't mean that all systems are hooked up and working. Specifically, minimum viable artwork means I've been working on implementing my UI and getting the Tycoon background going. Originally, this was going to be a UI video, where I would talk about the pains of H-boxes and V-boxes. But fortunately for you, I lost hours of footage due to those pesky technical difficulties. It was pretty tedious anyway, because implementing UI is probably the hardest thing for me when it comes to making games. The principles are similar between engines, but the layout options are always the most esoteric and confusing things I've ever seen. And I have a PhD, so I'll just tell you what I did and what problems I had, so that if you're thinking of making your own UI, you can see how terrible it is and decide to do something better with your time. I'm joking, kinda. The first step was turning my prototype, which I developed in a previous video, into UI objects in Godot. This was already a problem for the sole fact that I decided to give all my UI boxes a skew. The problem with this is if you resize the boxes, which happens a lot in game UI, the angle of the skew will be different. I decided to test out recreating the boxes with Godot's style box, and it worked. But the skew seems to be a newer feature to the engine, and I couldn't get Godot and Inkscape skewing in the same units, which meant I had to draw some angles by hand. I got the events panel working on the left side and the graph on the right. Then I used tweens to animate them so they can clear the screen in a nice smooth motion. I moved the employee slider front and center with the time controls and information about the date and money totals. I put the time to release on top, where it's always visible but out of the way. Finally, I had to figure out this height bar. In my prototype, it was left as just a vague idea, and it looks kinda... well, just ignore that. But the idea was there. I just needed to implement it. I set up little lights for my height meter and spaced them out in a container. Then I hooked each one up to catch the value of the original height bar and translate it into an on or off light. Then all I needed to do was make icons for all the buttons and do some finishing touches. In the end, it started to look a lot like a playable game. Plus, nobody can tell from screenshots that the menu button doesn't work or that there are a ton of bugs. Next, I set out to make a little isometric office that the player can fill with employees. I knew this needed to be vector art and have a top-down view like most other Tycoon games. I also wanted the employees to be faceless because they aren't important, they're just tools for the CEO to use. On this basis, I got to work iterating. The first thing I did was generate hundreds of little bros, because what is a AAA studio without a bunch of bros? I wanted them to pop into and out of existence whenever you move the slider, complete with randomly generated clothes, hair, and skin tones. To do this, I had to make employee scenes that had several sprites in them. This allowed me to set up arrays of colors for the sprites to choose from randomly and color each part. Then I had to draw animations and break those up into separate parts like hair, arms, legs, shoes, etc. To my surprise, this not only worked, but the results were really satisfying. Now I wanted to have the guys sit down and work and have meetings, which meant I needed to draw an office. My first roadblock here was figuring out how to even draw something in an isometric perspective. I tried making cubes and fumbling around until I finally learned that Inkscape has something called an axonometric grid, and that it's essentially isometric. Except it's not at all. Or at least not according to Godot, where the isometric tile maps are what looks like a 45-degree angle instead of Inkscape's 30-degree angle. So I just went ahead and decided not to use tile maps, which means my whole office is made up of objects I manually placed in the scene. Again, we're iterating on a prototype at the same time as reaching that minimum viable artwork. Things don't have to work perfectly, they just have to look like it for now. With a lot of trial and error, I got walls up, filled the office with desks and chairs, and got my bros to sit in them by making them invisible and activating sprites on the chairs, and passing over all the correct colors. That's actually something I got from Theme Hospital, which they reportedly did to save memory, but I did to save myself from doing math on coordinates. After all this, I had an office shaping up, but it just didn't look right. I kept messing with the floor colors until I realized it was just too noisy. I realized that the style of vector art I was honing in on this whole time is a corporate, minimalist, impressionistic look. It's perfect for AAA Simulator. It mimics realism while flattening everything into a dreamlike state. I made a flat wood texture in the style I was going for, put that on the central floor, and simplified the colors of the other rooms. This is when everything really started to work, in my opinion. Here's what it looks like now. You can hire and fire employees, and they'll crowd into the office and wander around just like real cubicle workers. I want to eventually add some more body types and hairstyles, but I think this is perfect for now. A bunch of samey bros walking around a studio is one of the most AAA visuals I can think of. I added a camera so you can zoom in and out, but not too far. The focus is on the UI, the graphs, and the money, not on the details of an office where your only interaction is determining how many bros to stuff in, or fire. So what do you think? I think it's just about ready for some screenshots. It definitely looks better than this, and seeing the difference is really cool to me. I guess I just love making games. There's something magical about seeing them come to life. You should definitely try it if you haven't. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll see you in a few weeks and we can work on a gameplay trailer together. Thanks for watching.